Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining the NCAA Initial Eligibility webinar. My name is Amber Viles, and today I'm joined by my colleague, Vince Gimrick. Before we get started, I have just a few quick housekeeping things to note. First, of course, yes, this webinar is being recorded and will be emailed to all registrants. So while there's a lot of information that's going to be covered today, you will be able to go back and watch the recording at your own pace. This email will also include a PDF of today's slide deck with clickable links on everything so you can go through and click. We're also going to be putting in the chat links as we go. So if you happen to see any QR codes and you're thinking, I can't scan that, I'm on my phone, it's okay. Just look at the chat and the QR code link is going to be in the chat as well. Also, as noted on our previous slide, you can hear us and hopefully are able to see us, but we can't hear or see you. So please use the Q&A function to ask us any questions as we go through today's webinar. We do have staff standing by to answer your questions directly via chat. For today's agenda, Vince will discuss what the NCAA Eligibility Center is and our certification outcomes. He'll also talk a little bit about recruiting, and then I'll come on, finish us off with some resources, and of course, we will take your questions live. Now I'm going to hand things over to Vince Gimrick, the Assistant Director of Customer Service.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Amber. My name is Vince Gimrick. I'm an assistant director with the Eligibility Center. I've been with the Eligibility Center now for 9 years, and my primary role with the Eligibility Center is assisting NCAA schools with their international students, but that also involves working with international students, parents, recruiters, schools, and international parties of all types. So today I'm going to discuss the Eligibility Center, international initial eligibility, and our system very broadly. To start, it's important to note that there are some differences in the names used for international schools and the names used for schools here in the United States. Specifically, we often refer to secondary school in the United States as high school, which normally ends in academic year 12 for students. However, in the US, we also use the word college and university interchangeably, understanding that a lot of international secondary schools call themselves colleges. You may also hear domestic schools referred to as institutes. An example is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology is a university in Massachusetts, but it's the same as a college or a university in terms of what we would call it. Other possible options for us that are common in the United States are junior or community colleges. Those are 2-year colleges where students can start their college career, and then usually they end up transitioning to a 4-year college or university after junior or community college, where they can pursue a bachelor's degree. Now, in terms of U.S. colleges and universities, today we are representing the NCAA, but we are not the only collegiate athletic association in the United States. Mainly, there are 3 major associations. However, there are others. The main 3 are the NAIA, the NJCAA, which represents junior colleges, and then again, we are the NCAA. So if you're interested in attending an NJCAA school or an NAIA school, you would want to contact them for more information about their programs. And we are happy to assist you with any questions or information you may need regarding NCAA schools. NCAA schools are broken into 3 divisions: Division 1, Division 2, and Division 3. Those 3 divisions represent 3 different sets of schools, and each one of those 3 divisions have different rules regarding initial eligibility and amateur eligibility. It's also worth mentioning that while we're referring mostly today about NCAA sports and teams, there are other non-NCAA sports that are represented on most campuses across the United States. Oftentimes those will be referred to as club or intramural teams, whereas the collegiate teams that represent schools are not club or intramural. Those are the teams that actually represent the entire school. So again, just to reiterate, we are with the NCAA Eligibility Center today, referring mostly to initial eligibility information regarding NCAA student athletes. But the NCAA Eligibility Center is only associated with the NCAA and not associated with any other collegiate athletic association. For international students, Eligibility Center registration is required for sports participation at any NCAA school at any one of the 3 NCAA divisions. So we've talked a little bit about it already, but now we're going to talk about what is the NCAA in general. Well, again, the NCAA stands for the National Collegiate Athletic Association. It represents 3 different divisions of colleges and universities in the United States. And here you can see some broad numbers for how the breakdown falls for each of those 3 divisions. You'll notice that there are around 300 or more schools per division. So total, there are over 1,200 NCAA schools total, and we represent over 500,000 student athletes between those 3 divisions. Now, not all sports are NCAA sports, but here is the list of NCAA sports that are sponsored by NCAA schools and then represented by us, and that require Eligibility Center registration and initial eligibility certifications. Please carefully check this list to see if your sport is on the list. We often get questions about men's versus women's, meaning the words men's and women's. And for our purposes, those would be the same as boys or girls sports. So if you play boys basketball, for example, then for our purposes, that would be the same as playing men's basketball. Now, there are emerging sports listed in that far column on the right. Emerging sports are not sports that are currently sponsored by the NCAA, but they are emerging to the point that they may end up being full NCAA sports soon, sometime in the coming years. So students in emerging sports must still register with the Eligibility Center and have to meet all of the same standards as all other students. Now I'm going to pause on this slide because it's an important slide and it's one that we often get lots of questions about. If you click on the link on this slide, you'll get taken to an interactive map that locates NCAA schools. Question we often get is how you are supposed to pick the school that you wish to attend. And the answer there is always it's really up to you, talking to the schools that you're interested in attending to determine if they're interested in recruiting you as a student athlete. If you use this interactive map, you can pick the places you're interested in attending school at. You can see which schools sponsor which sports, and you can also see which schools in which divisions sponsor which sports. So using this interactive map is a great tool that you can use to narrow down your potential searches and options to help you tailor your recruiting experience to your needs and your desires. And then from there, you can go about contacting the schools directly, and they can provide you more information about their programs. So again, the other questions we get often are, how do I pick a school? Here are some general options in terms of how you may want to pick a school. Ultimately, which school you choose to attend is completely up to you, and it can be guided entirely by whatever factors you deem most important. Some here, though, are school size, school locations, types of majors and minors. A major is a course of study that you would pursue at that particular school. And then others may be cost of attendance or student to faculty ratio. Again, if you have questions about that, you can always use that interactive map, find the school that you're interested in attending, and then do more research about each of those individual schools to see if that's the type of school that you would like to attend based on, again, whatever criteria you deem most important. Also worth mentioning on this slide that every NCAA school does have their own specific admissions process and admissions requirements. NCAA rules are independent of any particular NCAA school's admissions requirements, and they may be different. So for example, a school may need you to send certain documents, where the Eligibility Center may need you to send other documents. And so to determine the admissions requirements for any school, you always just need to contact that school directly to determine what those admissions requirements are for them. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the Eligibility Center. This is a photo of the outside of our office here in Indianapolis, Indiana. So what is the Eligibility Center? Well, we're a unit within the NCAA. We provide initial eligibility, academic and amateurism certifications for college-bound student athletes that are required for collegiate competition at NCAA schools. And the basic idea of why we do what we do is to create a fair and equitable competition across NCAA schools and divisions, while also ensuring that incoming student athletes are college ready before they're able to compete in their sport. So there's 3 main requirements in order to play college sports. You must be a high school graduate, you must meet NCAA initial eligibility requirements, and then again, you must be admitted to the college or university that you've applied to that you wish to compete for. As I mentioned before, university admission is independent of NCAA certifications, and you must apply and be accepted to the NCAA school you wish to attend before you would be able to compete. Very importantly here, this is where you would want to ask your university that you wish to attend about their cost of attendance or any potential financial aid or scholarships that may be available. We'll talk more about financial aid and scholarships later, but it's important at this part of the process that you would be asking those questions. Also worth asking whether or not they have any specific testing requirements. So they may require you to take the SAT or ACT, for example, or other English language equivalency tests. These are not required for NCAA certification, but may be required for university admissions. And one school may require something that another school doesn't. So again, you have to check with each school individually to determine their admissions requirements. All right, so again, we'll keep talking about scholarships throughout the presentation. It's obviously a very important part of initial eligibility and the student athlete experience. But scholarships in general can be very broad and cover many different things. And it's not guaranteed that one type of scholarship will cover all of these particular areas. Now, it's worth mentioning that NCAA Division III does not offer athletics scholarships, meaning any scholarship that you would get offered by an NCAA Division III school is independent of your athletics ability and would be based on their own particular on-campus criteria for awarding those scholarships. So if you're interested in attending Division III and you're hoping to get a scholarship, you would always just have to check with those schools for whatever possible opportunities they may have for you. In terms of athletic scholarships, though, Division I and Division II offer scholarships in all of these different areas. The only difference here between Division I and Division II, as you'll see on the chart, is that Division II does not offer multi-year athletic scholarships. Meaning, if you attend an NCAA Division I school, they may offer you a scholarship for all 4 years of your college, for example, whereas Division II, they only offer year by year, 1 year at a time, athletic scholarships. Those potentially could cover up to your tuition and fees, your room and board, your books, any other course-related materials, and may even additional funding beyond that. However, again, when you're engaging in those conversations with NCAA schools you're interested in attending, you just want to make sure to ask them about any specifics of any scholarship that they're either offering you or potentially may offer you so that you can know exactly what is and is not covered. So again, here, it's very, very important for you to understand what is covered by your NCAA school and then the other costs that you would be responsible for outside of that aid. Now, as I mentioned with regards to Division III only offers academic scholarships, but Division I and Division II schools both offer academic and athletic scholarships. Sometimes you could get both. So you may have a partial academic scholarship, for example, and a partial athletic scholarship. And then you would have to essentially combine those two scholarships to determine any additional costs that you would be responsible for as a student. Another question we get very frequently, especially at this stage in the process from incoming students, is how to become a professional athlete. The NCAA school or the NCAA only governs amateur athletes. And so we are only able to really provide good information about the collegiate sports experience. However, here's a handy chart regarding professional competition in general, and then roughly how many students end up becoming professionals in their sports. NCAA athletes usually become professionals at around a 2% rate, maybe less than 2%. So in general, the overwhelming majority of students that end up competing for NCAA schools as NCAA athletes do not go pro in their sport. However, instead of going pro in your sport, you get to attend college as a student athlete. You get to gain all of the valuable experiences of being an NCAA athlete, while also getting a first-rate education at the institution you'll be attending. All right, so here's a handy chart regarding steps to take and the order to take them in. You don't have to follow this chart directly, but in general, it's helpful if you're wanting a roadmap for how to pursue a career with the NCAA. This is always a handy chart to follow. Step one is always registering with the Eligibility Center. The Eligibility Center's website is www.eligibilitycenter.org or .org. You can see the spelling of Eligibility Center at the top of this slide and throughout this presentation. But again, step one is always registering a free profile account with the Eligibility Center. And then you can later upgrade that account if you decide you wish to pursue an NCAA education and wish to compete for an NCAA school. So step one is to register. Then you can plan your high school career, follow the process that's laid out on the slide, graduate from secondary school, and then continue with that process, potentially get your visa, and go through that process directly with your NCAA school and the embassy of your country. All right, so here's the landing page for our website. Again, www.eligibilitycenter.org. And this is what it looks like. So if you end up going to a website that maybe isn't our website, for example, if you just Google Eligibility Center, you may not get taken directly to our website. That's why we recommend going directly to the website rather than using a search engine. However, here's what the general landing page looks like. Worth mentioning that the photo of the shoes that you see in the background there, those do change every time that you refresh the page. So if you see a different photo in the background, that's okay. It's still our website. But you'll notice that there is a login page. And then once you log in and register, then you would be able to access your account. So best practice, if possible, is to register before year 9. And again, you can start by registering that free profile account. But not to worry, if you're already in year 9 or beyond year 9, you can still register, you can still complete the process. And in general, we do not have any deadlines regarding our process, so you can register and complete that process at any time. So we've talked a little bit about account types, and I just want to go through all 3 of those account types now because they're important to know. The first account type is the free profile page account. Again, anybody can register a free profile account at any time. Then the second 2 types of accounts are often needed for initial eligibility certifications, but you'll always want to check with the NCAA school you're going to attend to determine which account they need you to have. So number 3 on this list is that you can register an amateurism only certification account. That would be if you only need an amateurism certification. And then the middle option, which is the normal option, is to register an academic and amateurism certification account. And again, just double check with the NCAA school you want to attend so that they can tell you exactly the type of account that you need. So as I mentioned a couple times, the profile account is always the right place to start for most students. If you're not sure which NCAA division you plan to compete in, there's absolutely no harm in registering a free profile account. Also worth mentioning that if you are a basketball student athlete, then you will also need to register a profile account before you will be able to register to compete in NCAA certified non-scholastic basketball events. At this time, we only have those events in that process for basketball athletes. So if you compete in another sport other than basketball, you would not need a profile in order to engage in any secondary school level competition, but that is always subject to change and might change in the future. Again, the main benefit of the profile page is that it is absolutely free, costs absolutely nothing, and you can register it at any time. Then, if you're actively being recruited by an NCAA school, you can then transition that profile page into a certification account once you're ready and you've decided where you would like to be attending school. So academic and amateurism certification accounts, again, are our normal accounts. They are required to compete at a Division I or a Division II school unless you are transferring from another college or university. And they're required for you to sign an athletics aid agreement, to go on Division I official visits, or to receive an athletic scholarship. The registration fee for international students is $160. For domestic students, the registration fee is $100. But for all accounts, when you get to the payment screen, you can indicate that you are eligible for a fee waiver, and a fee waiver would exempt you from paying that registration fee if your fee waiver is approved. So you can click on that link to find out more information about fee waivers. And again, also if you forget it or you need it later, once you're registering and get to that payment screen, that's when you'll be able to see that same information about fee waivers. So if you do not need an academic certification and you just need an amateurism certification, then you can register for our relatively new amateurism only certification account. This type of account has only been in existence for a couple of years now, really just going live in the fall of 2023 for the first time. So specifically, if you wish to compete at a Division III school, you will need an amateurism only account at least. The registration fee is $70 for amateurism only accounts, and students that are transferring from a 2-year school or another 4-year school to an NCAA Division I or II school who do not need academic certifications would only need amateurism certification accounts. So again, specifically if you're looking to go D3 or if you're transferring from another college or university, you would only need an amateurism account. Always double check with your NCAA school to determine the type of account that you need. It's also worth mentioning here that if you register an amateurism only account, you can then later upgrade that into an academic and amateurism certification account, but you cannot start with an academic and amateurism account and then later change that to amateurism only. So if you choose the amateurism only account, then that is a safe option because most students will always need that. And then again, if you need it, you can upgrade it later to that academic certification account. So now we're going to talk about initial eligibility requirements, meaning what you need to do in order to be eligible as an incoming first-year student athlete for your NCAA school. For NCAA athletes, that always starts with what we call core courses, and those are academic courses in secondary school in core subjects. So I'm going to linger on this page just for a moment so that you all have a chance to see and use this QR code. Pull out your phone, scan the QR code, and it should take you to our International Course Title Usage Guide. The International Course Title Usage Guide is the document that we use for international students to determine what is and is not an academic core course. You'll see when you pull up that document that it has three main sections. The first two are tables that include words that, if they are in a course title, would automatically deny the course for eligibility. And then the third table is the table of words that are required for courses to be core courses. Now, I realize that isn't going to make a lot of sense if you don't know what I'm talking about. So let's talk a little bit more about specifics of what core courses are. So core courses for the Eligibility Center fall into these main categories: English or native language courses, math or mathematics courses at the Algebra 1 level or higher, science courses, social science courses, world languages, comparative religion, and philosophy. Now you'll notice that we have an English requirement, but on this slide it also says English or native language. For our purposes, for international students, English courses receive English credit, and native language courses in your country receive English credit for our purposes. For that full list of what we consider to be a native language for each country, that is in our international guide. And the international guide is our comprehensive guide for all countries that has all of our country-specific policies for each country. So that includes native languages, enrollment timelines, education histories, acceptable credentials, and approved and denied core courses. So in terms of that international guide, if you just use one of the links throughout this presentation for the full international guide, you'll see that it's something like 600 pages total now, because it includes most countries in the world. However, if you would like to just narrow it down to your country and have the specific policies for your country outlined for you succinctly, you can scan the QR code on this page, and it'll take you to our country-specific resources. On each of those websites for each country, you will find a PDF with a link to just the specific policies for your country as outlined in our international guide. So when you use that QR code, you'll be taken to a website that looks like this. You'll notice below, broken down, is each of the different regions of the world. If you click on that, wherever your country is, it will then take you to the list of specific countries for that region, and then you'd be able to find your country from there, and again, find those specific policies. So I've mentioned it a few times, but now let's take a look at what the international guide looks like. Here's the international guide page for Japan. As you can see, it breaks down what the academic calendar is for the country, at least according to the Eligibility Center. It says what year 9 is called. Again, very important for us that we award credit for years 9 and up for all students from all countries, regardless of whether year 9 is part of high school or sometimes it's part of lower secondary school, as it is in Japan. Again, we award credit for year 9 and up for everybody. As it says here, it's the last year of lower secondary school. The only native language is Japanese. The only graduation timeline is a 6 + 3 + 3 = 12 system, meaning they do 6 years of primary school, 3 years of lower secondary school, and 3 years of upper secondary school. Here you can see all of the acceptable forms of proof of high school graduation, in addition to the not acceptable forms of proof of high school graduation. And then if there were additional policies for Japan, they would be outlined on additional pages following this. That may include grading scales, specifically approved and denied core courses, potentially specific crediting policies for the country. And again, you can always find that information for your country, either in the full guide or on those country-specific pages. So now here's a term that we use in America very often. We often just call it a GPA. But if you hear somebody referring to GPA, what they mean is grade point average. And what a grade point average is it's a numeric representation of your grades for your courses that you took in high school. Because it's an average, We're taking all of the courses that you took, converting them into numbers, and then averaging them together to come up with this final number. So it's important for you to have a rough understanding of how the GPA scale works, but it's not extremely important for you to have specific information regarding exactly how the GPA scale works. The nice part is when you register with the Eligibility Center, one of the main services we provide is that when we attempt a certification on your account, we accept your documents, we review those documents, and we award the grades from the courses on your academic credentials. And then once all that's done, our system will provide your core course GPA for you. So you don't necessarily need to know this, but here is a rough breakdown of how GPAs in general work. A US grade of A gets the maximum GPA points in our system, and that is 4.0 points. You'll see that a US B converts to 3.0 GPA points. C is 2.0, D is 1.0, and F is 0.0. Now, most of the time for most international certifications, grades of F are not awarded credit and therefore are not used. So if you have failed courses in your secondary school career, most of the time those would not negatively impact your GPA. However, it also means that we would not award credit for the course, so you would have to have a credit in another course to make up the credit that you will not be receiving for the failed course. So let's just talk about some general certification outcomes for Division I and Division II. Here are the main different certification outcomes. You can be an early academic qualifier. You can be a qualifier. You can be a red shirt, or you can be a non-qualifier. The best two are the ones that say qualifier. So that's always what you're aiming for. So now let's talk a little more specifically about what the difference is between an early academic qualifier and a qualifier. Early academic qualifiers for Division I are students that have earned 14 core courses in the pre-7th semester academic record from their secondary school education and earned a minimum of a 3.0 core course GPA. Now, what pre-7th semester academic record means is that for your first 3 years, from years 9 and up, we will review for early academic qualifiers. And if you earn 14 core courses in the correct subjects and have a 3.0 GPA, at that point you would be an early academic qualifier and you would not have to meet the normal full qualifier requirements. If you are a qualifier, either early academic qualifier or just a regular qualifier, you are eligible for athletics aid, practice, and competition in your first year at your NCAA school. Now, very important to mention that students always need both academic and amateurism certifications if they are initially enrolling at their NCAA school. So you may be academically eligible, but you would still have to clear the amateurism process in order to be fully eligible to compete. So mention the specific requirements for early academic qualifiers. Here are the specific subjects required for early academic qualifiers. Feel free to take note of this if this is something you're striving for. However, it's worth mentioning that early academic qualifiers just tend to be students that are strong students in general that take many core courses. Oftentimes they'll be early academic qualifiers. And really the benefit there is they will know that they are qualifiers a year before some other students might know that they are qualifiers. It's okay though if you're not meeting these requirements or it's just not possible to earn this many credits to just be a regular qualifier. Again, they're completely equivalent. So now let's talk about qualifiers. If you are a qualifier, your academic certification will ultimately say that you are a final qualifier. And again, as long as the word qualifier is there, then really that's the magic word that you're looking for to know that you're academically eligible for athletics aid, practice, and competition. So qualifiers require 16 credits in NCAA approved core courses. And then you have to complete 16 NCAA approved core course credits, normally in 8 semesters from the start of 9th grade, and have a 2.3 overall grade point average. It is worth mentioning, though, for international students that the education timeline for your country is going to ultimately be based on the proof of graduation credential that you earn. So make sure to check the international guide to see if you have a different graduation timeline that would require you to, or would allow you to graduate in less than or more than 8 semesters. Some credentials have graduate in 10 or 11 years, and other credentials graduate in 12, 13, or 14 years. So you may have many more than 8 semesters to be able to use towards your overall academic certification for eligibility center purposes. So here's the Division I qualifier subject area breakdown. Again, here are the specific core course subject areas. You require 4 credits of English or native language courses, 3 credits of math, 2 credits of science, 1 of any of those English, math, or science, 2 credits of social science, and 4 credits of any additional core courses, including world languages, comparative religion, or philosophy. Now, I've talked a lot about the word credit. That's another word that we use in the American educational system that you may just not be familiar with. So the way that we award credit for international students changes slightly based on the country you are from and the academic credential that you ultimately earn. However, in general, we award 1 credit per academic year for English, math, or native language courses, and then 1/2 credit per year for all other courses. This is what we refer to as our standard crediting policy, and it is our universal standard policy for all students from all countries. Again, though, depending on the country you're from and the specific credential you earn, we may award more or different credit for the credential you ultimately are completing. So if you have any questions about how our policies work for you or for your country, don't hesitate to reach out to the Eligibility Center at any one of the contact points that we will detail later in this presentation, and we're happy to answer your specific questions. The reality is it's a big world, and because there are so many countries, so many credentials, and so many different overlapping policies, it may not be easy for you to determine for yourself how anything is necessarily going to work for your specific certification. So again, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to answer your specific questions. So before I move off of this slide, I just want to give a basic example of how this might work for a standard international student. For example, if a student is in their home country, let's use France as an example. In France, the only native language that we have is French. So if a student is in France for 1 year and they take French language, English language, a math course, 1 science course, and 1 social science course like history or geography, we would then award them the following credit. They would get 1 credit for the English course that they took, 1 credit for the French course that they took, 1 credit for the math course that they took, but then they would only get 1/2 credit for the science course and then 1/2 credit for the social science course that they took. So here, in order to meet the Division I requirements for science and social science, you often have to have 4 years worth of science and social science courses. Again, unless the crediting is different for your country or your credential, that's all outlined in our international guide. So that's what's required to be a qualifier. The next certification that you can receive underneath a qualifier is what's referred to as an academic red shirt. You'll notice in the left-hand column, normally a qualifier is eligible for athletics aid, practice, and competition in their first year at their NCAA school. Academic red shirts are only eligible for athletics aid and practice in their first year, but they cannot compete for their NCAA school in their first year. They have to quote unquote red shirt, which just means you're on the team, you're able to be a part of the team as normal, but you just can't actually engage in any competition. In terms of the specific requirements here, The credits outlined on the previous slide are the same for academic red shirts and for qualifiers. The difference between the two is that academic red shirts are students that have achieved a 2.0 grade point average or higher, but they have not met the 2.3 GPA requirement. So students between a 2.0 and a 2.9 GPA that have the same required 16 academic core courses, those would end up being academic red shirts for Division I, where again, they're eligible for aid and practice, but not competition. In general, we have relatively few academic red shirts per year, usually not more than maybe 5% of the overall student athlete population, and I'm not sure if we've ever had as many as 5% total. So not many students end up being red shirts, but it's just worth mentioning that there is a middle tier of certification in case your GPA just was not high enough to meet that qualifier standard. All right, and then the third possible or fourth possible certification decision, qualifier, red shirt, and non-qualifiers. Non-qualifiers are students that did not meet our academic initial eligibility requirements. Non-qualifiers are not eligible for athletics aid, practice, or competition for Division I schools. And so obviously the big difference there is that your NCAA school would not be able to offer you an athletic scholarship if you're a non-qualifier. And again, you would not be able to practice or compete with your NCAA school. So if you receive a certification decision of non-qualifier, it's very important for you to check with the athletics compliance office at the NCAA school that you wish to attend to discuss your options. They may be able to provide you information about additional core courses you can take to rectify your deficiencies or any other possible paths that you might have for eligibility. Important for you to have those conversations directly with your NCAA school, though, as they will be able to give you their best information as to what they deem most appropriate for their needs and your needs as an incoming student athlete. All right, so now we're going to talk about Division II certification outcomes. Division I has 4 different certification outcomes, but Division II only has 3 different certification outcomes. Broadly, they are the same outcomes as Division I, so I won't go into extreme detail regarding the differences, mostly because early academic qualifiers and qualifiers for Division II have all of the same benefits of early academic qualifiers and qualifiers for Division I. It's just the actual specific requirements between those two divisions are slightly different, although mostly similar. So now let's talk a little bit about those specifics. So Division II early academic qualifiers would make you eligible for athletics aid, practice, and competition in your first year at your Division II school. Same as Division I, it's based on your first 3 years of school from years 9 and up. You have to earn 14 NCAA approved core course credits in the required subject areas, but Division I required a 3.0 GPA and Division II only requires a 2.5 GPA in those early core courses. Here's the crediting breakdown for Division II early academic qualifiers. All right, now let's talk about Division II qualifiers. Division II qualifiers, again, would make you eligible for athletics aid, practice, and competition. You have to earn 16 NCAA approved core course credits in the required subjects. You have to have a minimum of a 2.2 GPA in those subjects, whereas Division I requires a 2.3 GPA. And then here are the specific crediting breakdowns. Now, if you were to compare these requirements directly to the Division I requirements, you'll notice that most of the credits are the same. The main difference is that Division I has some additional specific requirements in specific subject areas, whereas Division II is slightly more flexible and has a little bit more available crediting in the additional and extra English, math, or native language or science departments. That being said, if you end up taking 16 core courses at one division, most of the time you're going to meet the requirements for both of the divisions simultaneously. However, it's more common for students to meet the Division II requirements and maybe not meet the Division I requirements. So if you're aiming for one or the other, it's usually most helpful to try to meet the Division I requirements, because if you meet the Division I requirements, you will guaranteed meet the Division II requirements. So Division II does not have non-qualifier decisions. Division II has partial qualifier decisions instead of non-qualifiers. Division II partial qualifier decisions are effectively identical to Division I academic redshirt decisions. Division II partial qualifiers are eligible for athletics aid and practice in their first year at their Division II school, but they are not eligible for competition. Same as non-qualifiers for Division I, however, if you end up being a Division II partial qualifier, it's very important for you to check with the NCAA School's Athletics Compliance Office to determine if there are any additional steps you can take to discuss your options as you proceed with your certification. So I'm just going to hold on this slide for a moment. This will take you to a website which will detail all of our different initial eligibility requirements that were outlined in this presentation. And you can bookmark that and leave that as a handy reference for yourself as you think about pursuing your secondary school education. So that way, hopefully you can try to stay on track regarding NCAA initial eligibility requirements. So now we've talked about Division I and Division II initial eligibility requirements on the academic side. Let's talk a little bit about Division III. Division III is one of the three NCAA divisions, as we've discussed throughout the presentation. However, every Division III NCAA school has their own initial eligibility academic standards. So they'll have their own admissions process, their own admissions requirements, but then they will also have their own initial eligibility academic requirements that you would need to meet in order to be eligible for them. So what that means is that students wishing to only attend school at Division III would not need academic certifications through the Eligibility Center. However, as of fall 2023, all international students wishing to compete for Division III schools must register with the Eligibility Center and receive a final amateurism certification prior to being eligible for competition at the Division III school. So very, very important if you're if you're planning on attending a Division III school, you need to be working closely with that Division III school to determine what admissions and academic eligibility standards they may have regarding their particular certifications. So we have one general policy regarding education impacting disabilities. It's a universal policy for all students, international or domestic, and it provides the same accommodation. So if you have an education impacting disability, it needs to be a current impairment that has a substantial educational impact on your student's academic performance, and it requires accommodation. All NCAA students with or without education impacting disabilities must meet the exact same initial eligibility requirements. So they have to take the same courses in the same subjects. The big difference between the two is that Division I students with education impacting disabilities can take up to 3 additional core courses after graduating high school prior to full-time enrollment that can be used towards their certification. All Division II students with or without education impacting disabilities can take an unlimited number of core courses after 9th grade before enrolling full-time at their college or university that can be used towards their academic certification. If you need more information about education impacting disabilities, please visit the link below for on.ncaa.com/EID for more information. If you wish to register your education impacting disability with the Eligibility Center, you would just need to indicate that information when you register, and there will be additional documentation that you would need to provide for us to have that on file. Again, really only important if you wish to attend a Division I school and you were hoping to be able to take up to 3 core courses after graduating high school. If that does not apply to you or you're wishing for some other accommodation, that would not be something that would be possible through our education impacting disability policy. So another common word you may hear regarding NCAA athletes is the word reclassify. Reclassify usually means that students are planning on either graduating earlier than they expected to, or later than they expected to, or later than other students would normally graduate in their home country. It's very important for you to understand that changing your graduation date may have a significant impact on your academic and amateurism eligibility. And so if you plan on graduating earlier or later than expected, it's very important for you to work directly with the NCAA school you wish to attend to discuss any potential impact to your academic or amateur eligibility. Additionally, if you have any questions about that process or potential impacts, don't hesitate to reach out to the Eligibility Center, and we can work through all of those specifics with you on a case-by-case basis. So as I mentioned, graduating later than expected can have a significant impact on your academic eligibility. It can also have an impact on your amateur eligibility. We have a rule called the delayed enrollment rule, which penalizes students for continuing to compete in their sport after high school graduation prior to full-time enrollment at their NCAA school. The general rule here is that for most sports and most divisions, students are allowed 1 year after their expected date of high school graduation to continue competing in their sport without penalty. However, as you can see on the chart above, that specific rule is different depending on the sport that you play and the division that you ultimately wish to attend. So if you have more questions about the delayed enrollment rule or those potential penalties, please click on the link on this slide, and that'll take you to a full resource that explains that rule in detail. We always recommend graduating on the normal timeline for all students from your country pursuing the credential that you are earning, and then enrolling as soon as possible at your NCAA school after graduating high school to avoid any potential issues. All right, so now we're going to talk briefly about recruiting. Very important broadly to understand that recruiting is managed directly by NCAA schools, and it is generally not possible for students to violate any recruiting rules. So what that means is that if you have questions about recruiting, you can always reach out directly to any NCAA school you are wishing to attend, and they can directly answer your questions. If anybody's responsible for following recruiting rules, it's the NCAA schools themselves. So like I said, you're never at risk of asking the wrong question or asking it at the wrong time. If you have any specific questions about any of these issues, please reach out to the NCAA schools you're interested in attending, and they can answer those directly for you. For Eligibility Center purposes, the most important thing about recruiting is being added to what's called an institutional request list. Sometimes this is referred to as an IRL. An institutional request list is an indicator in our system that you're being actively recruited by an NCAA school. Very, very important for our purposes that we do not attempt certifications on Eligibility Center accounts until students are added to active IRLs. So until you are being actively recruited by an NCAA school, we would not determine your initial eligibility. However, it's free and easy for NCAA schools to add you to their lists. So any school that you're interested in attending, you can always just contact them and ask them to add you to their IRL if they're interested in recruiting you. Again, in general, there's a concept of what are called recruiting calendars. Those have specific breakdowns of when schools are allowed to contact you directly and when you're allowed to contact them or visit them. Those change depending on the sport, where the student is from, the academic calendar for the particular student. And again, it gets pretty complicated pretty quickly. So rather than you be responsible for knowing any of those rules, you can click on the link for recruiting calendars. But again, you can always contact the NCAA schools directly for more information. The worst case scenario is that the school may not be able to have direct contact with you at any given point. And so at that point, they may just not respond to your requests. But that's as bad as it could get. You can't get in any more trouble than them just not being able to talk to you at that given moment. So I'll pause here briefly so that you can scan this QR code if you want more information about recruiting calendars. I mentioned a moment ago about official versus unofficial visits. An official visit is any visit to a college campus paid for by the NCAA school you're visiting. Before you go on an official visit, you have to register with the Eligibility Center, be on a school's active institutional request list, and we need an official copy of a high school transcript, even if you haven't graduated from high school yet. Unofficial visits are visits where the school would not be paying for you to visit them. You would essentially be paying for yourself to visit them. And that's the difference between official versus unofficial visits. In terms of what to talk about when you're either on an official or unofficial visit, or if you're deciding which schools you wish to visit before deciding where you're interested in attending, here are some just good questions that you can ask coaches or the athletic staff or even admission staff at your NCAA school for more information. Another hot topic that I'm sure you've heard about is called name, image, and likeness. In general, NCAA student athletes can benefit from their name, image, and likeness. For more information, you can click on the link that's outlined on this slide. It is very important to understand that the NCAA is not responsible for helping you determine the legality of any particular name, image, and likeness contract or anything regarding any legal questions. So legal questions should always be directed to either your local government or to the NCAA school that you're interested in attending, and they can help you understand the legal framework for any potential name, image, and likeness deal that you could potentially pursue. Athletics aid, if you sign for athletics aid with an NCAA Division I or II school, it's voluntary and it ends your recruiting process. It means that you are signing with the school for a minimum of 1 academic year. You have to be admitted to the NCAA school, and you must be eligible for financial aid with that NCAA school under NCAA rules. All right, thank you, everybody. I'm going to pause here, and now I'm going to hand it over to Amber, and she's going to talk about some of our resources.
Thank you, Vince. And how is everyone doing? I know that was a lot of information we threw at you, but not to worry. Remember, everyone who registered for today's webinar will get an email with not only a recording of the webinar, but also of a PDF with clickable links so that you can click through all of these links and even the QR codes. Of course, if you have any questions, please continue to put those in the chat. We have staff standing by, and you'll even see Vince and I in the chat. After this webinar is over, we'll hang on and answer any questions that you have via chat to you directly. And of course, if you have your cell phone out, you can go ahead and give this QR code a scan. What this is going to do is take you directly to the most comprehensive international resource that we have, the Guide to the International Academic Standards for Athletics Eligibility. I use this guide all the time to help answer any questions that you and your family ask us on social media. So if you have a question, most likely the answer is going to be in this guide. On this next slide, you're going to see more QR codes, and we'll put these in the chat as well. But these go to our social media channels. The one I like to highlight here is our YouTube channel. So if you are confused about which account type you need or how to request final amateurism certification or any question that we've gone over today, you can use our resources. So these are all quick videos, about 2 or 3 minutes, that will help walk you through the process. Again, thank you all for joining us today. As we mentioned before, we will email a link of today's webinar to everyone who registered in the coming days. So if you have teammates that you think would benefit from hearing this information, you could just forward this webinar along to them. Again, my name is Amber Viles. On behalf of myself and Vince Gimrick, if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to support you and your family as things change and questions arise. Thank you and be safe.